Chapter 14 of Martha by the Day. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Martha by the Day by Julie M. Lippmann. Chapter 14. "Frank," said Mrs. Sherman one Sunday morning some weeks later, stopping her brother on his way to the door, "can you spare me a few moments? There's something very important I want to discuss with you. I want you to help me with suggestions and advice in a matter that very closely concerns someone in whom I'm greatly interested." Mr. Ronald paused. "Meaning?" he suggested. "I don't know what I ought to tell you. You see, it's confidential." "Suggestions and advice are foolish things to give, Catherine. They are seldom taken, never thanked for. Well, in this case mine have actually been solicited, and I feel I ought to do something, because in a way I'm more or less responsible for the imbroglio." Slipping her arm through his arm, she led him back into the library. "You see, it's this way. Perhaps after all it will be better, simpler, if I don't try to beat about the bush. Amy Pelham has been terribly devoted to Mr. Van Brandt for ever so long, quite 6 months, and he has been rather attentive, though I can't say he struck me as very much in love. You know, she asked me out to Tuxedo not long ago. She wanted me to watch him and tell her if I thought he was serious. Well, I watched him, but I couldn't say I thought he was serious. However, you never can tell. Men are so extraordinary. They sometimes masquerade so their own mothers wouldn't know them." "Or their sisters." "What did you say?" "Nothing worth repeating. Go on with your story." "Well then, one evening she brought him here, you remember. I'd asked him to come when I was in Tuxedo, and he evidently wanted to do so, for he proposed to Amy that she bring him. Of course I'd no idea he and Miss Lang had ever met before, and when I innocently ordered her in, I did it simply because Radcliffe was refractory and refused to come without her, and I couldn't have a scene before guests." "Well?" "I didn't know Mr. Van Brandt came from Grand Rapids. How should I? One never thinks of those little provincial towns as having any society." "You dear, insolent New Yorker. Well, you may jeer as much as you like, but that's the way one feels. I didn't know that, as Martha says, he was formerly born in Michigan. I just took him for granted, as one does people one meets in our best houses. He's evidently of good stock. He has money, not a fortune perhaps, but enough. He's handsome, and he's seen everywhere with the smartest people in town. Well, naturally, Amy doesn't want to lose him, especially as she's really awfully fond of him, and he is uncommonly attractive, you know. Well, it looks as if that one glimpse of Miss Lang had been enough to upset everything for Amy. He's hardly been there since." "And what does she propose to do about it?" "She doesn't know what to do about it. That's where my suggestions and advice are to come in." "I see. Of course we can't be certain, but from what Bob Van Brandt has dropped, and from what Amy has been able to gather from other sources, from people who knew Miss Lang and him in their native burg, he was attached to her when she was no more than a kiddie. Then, when they grew up, he came east and she went abroad, and they lost sight of each other. But as I say, that one glimpse of her was enough to ignite the old flame. You must have seen yourself how frankly, openly he showed his feeling that night." "Well, what is one to do about it?" "Do about what?" "Why, the whole thing. Don't you see, I'm responsible in a way. If I hadn't called Miss Lang in, Bob Van Brandt wouldn't have known she was here, and then he would have kept on with Amy. Now he's dropped her. It's up to me to make it up to her somehow." "It's up to you to make what up to Amy?" "How dense you are! Why, the loss of Bob Van Brandt." "But if she didn't have him, how could she lose him?" "She didn't exactly have him, but she had a fighting chance." "And she wants to fight?" "I think she'd be willing to fight if she saw her way to winning out." "Winning out against Miss Lang?" "Yes, if you want to put it so brutally." "I see. You are assuming that Miss Lang is keen about Van Brandt." "Would you wonder if she were? It would be her salvation. Of course, I don't feel about her any longer as I did once. I know now she's a lady, but the fact of her poverty remains. If she married Bob Van Brandt, she'd be comfortably settled. She'd have ease and position, and oh, of course she'll marry him if he asks her." "So the whole thing resolves itself down to—" "To this: if one could only devise a way to prevent his asking her." "Am I mistaken, or did I hear you say something about putting it brutally a few moments ago? Well, I know it sounds rather horrid, but a desperate case needs desperate medicine. Catherine, you have asked for suggestions and advice. My suggestion to Miss Pelham is that she gracefully step down and out. My advice to you is that you resist the temptation to meddle. If Mr. Van Brandt wishes to ask Miss Lang to marry him, he has a man's right to do so. If Miss Lang wishes to marry Mr. Van Brandt after he has asked her, she has a woman's right to do so. Any interference whatsoever would be intolerable. You can take my advice or leave it. But if you leave it, if you attempt to mix in, you will regret it, for you will not be honorably playing the game." Mrs. Sherman's lips tightened. "That's all very well," she broke out impatiently. "That's the sort of advice men always give to women and never act on themselves. It's not the masculine way to sit calmly by and let another carry off what one wants. If a man cares, he fights for his rights. It's only when he isn't interested that he's passive and speaks of honorably playing the game. All's fair in love and war. If you were in Amy's place, if the cases were reversed, and you saw something you'd set your heart on being deliberately taken away from you, I fancy you wouldn't gracefully step down and out. At least, I don't see you doing it in my mind's eye, Horatio." "Ah, but you miss the point. There's a great difference between claiming one's own and struggling to get possession of something that is lawfully another's. If I were in Miss Pelham's place and were sure the one I loved belonged to me by divine right, I'd have her. I'd have her in spite of the devil and all his works. But the thing would be to be sure, and one couldn't be sure as long as another claimant hadn't had his chance to be thrown down. When he'd had his chance and the decks were cleared, then—" "Goodness, Frank, I'd no idea you could be so intense, and I'll confess I've never given you credit for so much imagination. You've been talking of what you'd do in Amy's place quite as if you actually felt it. Your performance of the determined lover is really most convincing." Francis Ronald smiled. "A man who's succeeded in convincing a woman has not lived in vain," he said. "Well, I must be off, Catherine. Good luck to you and to Miss Pelham, but bad luck if either of you dares stick her mischievous finger in other people's pies." He strode out of the room and the house. Meanwhile, Martha, industriously engaged in brushing Miss Lang's hair, was gradually, delicately feeling her way toward what was in reality the same subject. "Well, of course you can have Cora if you want her. She'll be only too glad of the ride, but do you really think it's advisable to lug a third party along when it's clear as dishwater he wants you alone by himself and yourself? It's this way with men. If they set out to do a thing, they generally do it. But believe me, if you put impediments in their way, they'll sure do it, and then some. Now, all them flowers and candy that's been coming here lately so reg'lar, they means business on Mr. Van Brandt's part, if pleasure on yours. He's strewing your path with roses and paving it with Huyler's chocolates, so some day in the near future he can come marching along it and walk straight up to the captain's office and hand in his application for the vacancy. Now, the question is as plain as the nose on your face. Do you want him to do it first, or do you want him to do it last? It's up to you to decide the time, but you can bet your life it's going to be some time, Cora or no Cora, ohne oder mit, as our Dutch friend across the hall says. Claire's reflection in the mirror she sat facing showed a pair of sadly troubled eyes. "Oh, it's very puzzling, Martha," she said. "Somehow life seems all topsy-turvy to me lately. So many things going wrong, so few right." "Now, what, if I may make so bold, is wrong with your getting a first-class offer from a well-off, good-looking, gentleman friend that's been keeping company with you, off and on, as you might say, ever since you was a child, which shows that his heart's in the right place and his intentions is honourable? You know you mustn't let the procession get by you. Life's like standing on the curbstone watching the parade. At least that's how it seems to young folks. They hear the music and they see the banners and the floats, and they think it's going to be a continuous performance. After a while they got so used to the band a-playing and the flags a-waving that it gets to be an old story, and they think that that's what it'll be all right along, so they don't trouble to keep their eye peeled for the fellow with the water can, which he asked 'em to watch out for him. No, they argue he's good enough in his way, but think of the fellow with the drum, or even, it might be, who knows, the grand one with his mother's big black muff on his head, doing stunts with his grandfather's gold-topped club, his grandpa having been a policeman of the pull in the ward. And while they stand a-waiting for all the grandeur they're expecting, suddenly it all goes past, and they don't see nothing but perhaps a milk-wagon bringing up the rear, and the asphalt all strewed with ragtag and bobtail, and there's nothing doing in their direction, except turn around and go home. Now, what's the matter with Mr. Van Brandt? If you marry him, you'll be all right to the good. No worry about the rent, no pinching here and plotting there to keep the bills down, no going out by the day, rain or shine, traipsing the street on your 2 feet when you're so dead tired you could lay down and let the rest walk over you. Why, looking at it from any standpoint of view, I can't see but it's a grand opportunity. And you're fond of him, ain't you?" "Oh, yes, I'm very fond of Mr. Van Brandt, but I'm fond of him as a friend. I couldn't ever marry him." "What for you couldn't? It ain't as if you'd liked some other fella better. If you liked some other fella better, no matter how little you might think you'd ever get the refusal of him, I'd say stick to the real article. Don't be put off with substitutes. It ain't no use trying to fool your heart. You can monkey with your brain and make it believe all sorts of tommy-rot, but your heart is dead on to you, and when it once sets in hankering, it means business." Claire nodded unseeingly to her own reflection in the glass. "Now, my idea is," Martha continued, if you got something looming, why don't hide your face and play it isn't there. There ain't no use standing on the ragged edge till every tooth in your head shatters with cold and fright. You don't make nothing by it. If you love a man like a friend, or if you love a friend like a man, my advice is take your seat in the chair, grip a hold to the arms, brace your feet, and let her go, Gallagher. It'll be over in a minute, as the dentists say." "But suppose you had something else on your heart, something that had nothing to do with that sort of thing?" Claire asked. "What sort of thing?" "Why, love. Suppose you'd done something unworthy of you. Suppose the sense of having done it made you wretched, made you want to make others wretched. What would you do then?" "Now, my dear, don't you make no mistake. I ain't going to be drew into no blindsman's grab-bag little game, not on your sweet life. I ain't going to risk having you hate me all the rest of your natural life, because to be obliging, and also to show what a smart boy I am, I give a verdict with all the evidence in. If you want to tell me plain out what's fretting you, I'll do my best according to my lights, but otherwise—" "Well," began Claire, and then followed haltingly, stumblingly, the story of her adventure in the closet. "At first I felt nothing but the wound to my pride, the sting of what they said," she concluded. "But after a little I began to realize there was something else. I began to see what I had done. For you know I had deliberately listened. I needn't have listened if I had put my hands over my ears. If I'd crouched back away from the door and covered my head, I need not have overheard. But I pressed as close as I could to the panel and hardly breathed, because I wanted not to miss a word. And I didn't miss a word. I heard what it was, never meant I should hear, and I'm nothing but a common eavesdropper." "Now, what do you think of that?" observed Mrs. Slosson. "Now, what do you think of that?" "I've tried once or twice to tell him," continued Claire. "Tell who? Tell Mr. Van Brandt?" "No, Mr. Ronald." "Oh, you see, when you speak of he and him, it might mean almost any gentleman. But I'll try to remember you're always referring to Mr. Ronald. I've tried once or twice to tell him, for I can't bear to be untruthful. But then I remember I'm only the governess, the right person in the right place, of so little account that he doesn't even know whether I'm pretty or not, and the words choke in my throat. I realize it wouldn't mean anything to him. He'd only probably gaze down at me, or he'd be kind in that lofty way he has, and put me in my place as he did the first time I ever saw him, and so I've never told him. I couldn't. But sometimes I think if I did, if I just made myself do it, I could hold up my head again and not feel myself growing bitter and sharp because something's hurting me in my conscience." "That's it," said Martha confidently. "It's your conscience. Believe me, consciences is the dickens and all for making a mess of things when they get right down to business. Now, if I was you, I wouldn't bother Mr. Ronald with my squalms of conscience. Very probably when it comes to consciences he has troubles of his own. At least, if he ain't, he's an exception and a rare curiosity, and Mr. Pierpont Morgan ought to buy him for the museum. When your conscience tells you you'd oughter tell, 10 to 1, you oughtn't. Give other folks a chance. What they don't know can't worry 'em. Besides, your just telling a thing don't let you out. You can't get clear so easy as that. It's up to you to work it out. So what's wrong is made right, and do it yourself, not trust to nobody else. You can't square up by heaving your load off'n your own shoulders onto another fellow's. You think you feel light 'cause you done your duty, when 10 to 1 you done your friend. No, I wouldn't advise turning state's evidence on yourself, unless it was to save another from the gallows. As it is, you can take it from me, the best thing you can do for that conscience of yours is get busy in another direction. Dress yourself up as fetching as you can. Go out motoring with your gentleman friend like he asked you to. Let him get his proposal off in his chest, and then tell him you'll be a sister to him." End of chapter 14.